Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining in for the webinar. Myself, Abhishek, I'm from the admissions team of Anant University. Today, we have with us Professor Vijay Sekhon and Professor Bhaskar Bhatt to, to share their thoughts and sharing their experiences and for you, the young aspirants in the field of design, about the future in the field of design. Professor Vijay Sekhon, he has done his master's degree in animation, interactive technology, video graphics, and special effects from New York University. And he has worked with STEP University, Ahmedabad as faculty, Reliance Industries as brand strategy and marketing communications. And now he is guiding young designers like you all to build a career in design. We have with us Professor Bhaskar Bhatt. He has done his master's from NID, the dream college of all you young design aspirants. He has been a discipline lead for product design at NID. He was professor at IIT Gandhinagar also. Prior to join Anant National University, where he is a head of department for integrated product design and product design, he was the program director at ISDI Mumbai. So, not taking much time, I would request Professor Vijay to share his thoughts with the young aspirants. Over to you, Vijay, sir.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thanks for joining in. I'll just share my screen. Okay. All right. So I wrote a few notes, so I don't take up any time. Thanks for joining in. It is a rather strange time to talk about future when our present is in complete disarray, in many ways. We as a nation, apart from taking care of ourselves and others, it is also time to take sort of stock of current state of affairs and the role we can play to make better in future. Now, this global health crisis has accelerated was coming for a kind of really long time of every aspect of our life. Second, it brought us face to face with the futility of our many pursuits when put in context of our health and the health of the planet. Now, it is asking us to reassess many of our priorities. It is demanding us to look at things not just in a human time scale, but in a planetary time scale. To look at things the way the cycle of nature really works. Because life, as we know it, not just evolves in our time scale, but it has its own time scale. And we really need to look at things in a very different time zones. But we can only think in different time scale when we know what kind of life or a society we want. But what is rather revealing of our very conditioning is that we don't ask this fundamental question. So what does it really mean for you? What it means is that you will have a choice to make as you go along. On one side will be messy, complicated, quirky human beings with infinite possibilities and their unpredictabilities. In short, all the qualities that make us human. On the other side will be a laid out predetermined pathways, which will have which we all of us will have to follow. Any diversion on our path will be considered an anomaly and will trigger a course correction and perhaps restricted access to many of the services. All of you will have to develop the ability to understand what is happening not only inside your own self, but the global designed system and the way they are evolving and the way they are impacting our lives. Now, let me explain this with a very simple but a very well-known example. Perhaps some of you already know that on September 26, 1983, Colonel Stanislav Petrov was sitting in his command center, which was state of the art at that time, the height of Cold War. And this command center was an early warning system designed to detect any incoming intercontinental ballistic missile fired from anywhere around the world, especially America. Now, on 26 September, the system flashed in red launch. This has never happened before, but it said not only launch, but it said not one, but 5 intercontinental missiles were on their way to Soviet Union. And the protocol suggested that he immediately notifies his superior and a counter launch needs to be done right away. But he and his team make a, a decision that perhaps the system could show also an error. They analyze what is happening, they take a split second decision, and at that time he comes to a conclusion that whatever it may be, if the missiles are indeed launched, it is going to kill millions of us, but there is no point in adding another million to it. He and his team takes a decision not to launch, not to notify the seniors, and they come to a conclusion that it was actually the reflection of a sun on the radar systems that had caused this error. So they take a decision against the system which was designed to prevent a nuclear attack. And this example, of course, he was facilitated later on, but at that time he was shunned, his rank and file were taken away, and he was also punished. But he saved, perhaps single-handedly, millions of lives. So the systems we design are not always right. As we move forward in the world dominated by artificial intelligence and machine learning, we increasingly don't know how it works. We design them to learn, we design them to adapt, iterate, evolve, but at some point they go into a self-automation mode and we no longer understand how they really operate. And our financial markets are in some way reflective of what's really happening. Very, 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 very few people really understand how they operate at a global scale. So here, if you allow the systems to govern you, then perhaps you have made the choice, the second choice, and where the pathways are predetermined. So for all of us, the real agenda is continuity of our humanity, understanding of sustainability as a wholesome thing, to be understood as a continuity of life, rather than to see things in a stopgap fix solution. Now, to be realistic, really, no one can teach anyone anything unless the person desires to learn and is willing to learn. And in my view, the fundamental lesson you can learn in any education, in any school, of any university you choose, is to develop an ear that listens. Because listening requires you to be quiet. In that moment of quietness, the other enters. And it is in this process the true education happens, the true creativity happens. But along with creativity, you will have responsibility as well. And that's the nature of the time we live in. But what does it mean? First, it will mean that you will have to study the materiality and its impact. And as we transition from carbon-based economy to silicon-based economy, this transition to silicon-based life does not alter the way we live, which in the first place wounded the Mother Earth. And you can take the current sort of craze for electric vehicle and the great hopes that it will transform our environment. But nobody is looking at where the lithium ion batteries and the rare earth metals are going to come from. We essentially outsource the devastation which is right in front of us to some far-flung places, but they too are part of our ecosystem. So I'm in no way saying that EVs are bad. I'm saying that perhaps the real question in front of us is to not give up one thing quickly to adopt another. Perhaps the error we tend to make is to look for one golden solution for all our issues, as if there is one answer to all our problems. We simply want to play God in some way. Usually, one solution fits all philosophy is good for corporations because they design the system and they want more and more people to adopt it. But it's not necessarily good for the people. So, answer may not lay in one place but many places. Perhaps there is not one answer but many. Each answer responds to the peculiarity of the geography, particularity of that place. So the point I'm trying to make can be summed in the words of one of my favorite anthropologists, Tim Ingold. He says the real futurism will lay in marrying the ancient wisdom with the enthusiasm of young mind. Now, it is actually in the moment of crisis that true character comes out. Uh, what we truly are as individual and as society at large becomes visible. People in times of natural disaster or pandemic, as we see, are going out at extraordinary lengths to help each other. This core of humanity must not be traded for anything, no matter the reward. As a species, as a species, we have sort of evolved from Homo sapiens to Homo consumerus with complete disregard to the consequences of our actions. From there, we need to move to a basic understanding that life is intertwined web of everything. It is connected with everything is connected with everything. And we cannot afford to live in silos anymore. There are no escape pods. We cannot go to Mars to leave Earth for to be devastated. Our current vision of the future seems to follow a sort of a predetermined script. Take what was written in science fiction novels at the turn of last century, and you might find some eerie similarities of what's happening now. Now, take just to give you an example, take China. What's happening with the social credit score and over 200 million cameras installed all over China and growing exponentially to track every move is creating a sort of a virtual panopticon. And it is a matter of time before some form of version is adapted by everyone on earth. But so the story needs to be rewritten. We need to write a new kind of narrative. But the fundamentals of a good story does not change. They remain the same no matter what you use to tell it, be it cinema as we know it, be it virtual reality or immersive environment for people to experience the story. Human emotion and exploration of relationship remains at the very core of a good story. Now, though human emotion is at the core of it, and it is who we are, yet it is extremely difficult to be honest about it. One needs to have courage to really face it and to rather express it in a compelling way. And I tell you why this is more challenging, because we live in times that thrive on speed of data movement. For the system, it does not matter what the content is. It is designed to maximize the speed. So often you see the most desirable things get amplified very, very fast. So for you, the real challenge will lay in to develop an ability, develop an eye that can see the gray between black and white. For you, the challenge will be to learn together and create an alternative narrative that makes us see things in between the cracks, appreciate the glitches. Now, stories are moving into physical and virtual experiential zones where we interact with stories physically and influence how the story unfolds. Only thing we need not forget is to develop our poetic imagination, because often the tendency in designing immersive environment is giving too much on the plate, leaving no room for participants' imagination. Here, in this image which you see on your screen, is a project by director Alejandro Inarritu, who also directed very well-known film called Birdman, and perhaps a lot of you might have already seen it. Here he created a, a virtual story where participant can get in the shoes of an immigrant who's trying to cross border from Mexico to America illegally. It brings you face to face with the fears they face from police, from oppression, from the coyotes, from their aspirations and their dreams. This, and Inarritu's fundamental goal was to humanize these immigrants and not to sort of subject them to just someone far off and whose life is, it does not matter who they are and they are just a number. He wanted them to give them a face. And he created this virtual reality project. The following this work is by studio of Dan Roosgaarde. He's a Netherlands-based interactive and immersive experience designer. Here he brings to life the Van Gogh Starry Night painting in quite literally in a physical form by illuminating a path leading to Van Gogh's house. And these are specially cultivated algae that illuminates, and that was created, cultivated for this particular project. And I believe it was there for almost few weeks. The next project is um, based on a painting of a very famous artist called Edward Hopper, called Nighthawks, which takes you right inside the painting, which Edward Hopper would have never ever imagined that this was a possibility. And now you could quite literally go into the environment of a painting and experience it in a way that was unthinkable previously. So a lot is happening on the way stories are evolving and are being designed. But let me tell you something, that often the big studios, people who have all the resources in the world, um, they also fail to touch audiences' heart, essentially because it is not the tool that you have, it is what you say with it that really matters. So for you all, purposeful storytelling will be one of the most essential thing in your designing immersive experiences. So write your own script, your own narrative. That is sort of the end of rather my short sort of presentation. So Abhishek, over to you, and maybe Bhaskar can sort of take it from here.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Bhaskar, sir. Sir, Vijay sir, there is a question by Manini Gajjar. Who is the artist? Manini, if you can.
Dan Ruzgarde. For which one? Which project?
Manini, you can write in the chat box and we will take that question at the end. Over to you, Bhaskar, sir. Thank you, Vijay sir.
Is my screen visible, Abhishek?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Yes, sir.
Super, super. Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to speak to all of you today. These are terrible times, as Professor Vijay said, but I'm speaking to all of you from my house. I am COVID positive, but I could not resist the opportunity to speak to young, bright minds. Nothing could be more cheering than that for a teacher. And this is the reason why I immediately said, I have to do this. Right. So mine is going to be a slightly longish presentation. Professor Vijay had a wonderful artistic approach to design, and I, as a typical engineer and a product designer, will bring in a very functional aspect to design. So I will present the other side of the story, right? I would like to begin with this slide. I think this slide encapsulates everything that I believe about design. And it says design is really a behavior and not a department. I think nobody could have said this more wonderfully than this one beautiful line. People always think that there is a department of design. People who wear long kurtas and long hair, they are the ones who are creative. But actually, design lies in our hearts, design lies in our minds, and design lies in our attitudes towards life. And that's exactly what I'm going to talk to you about. Right? One second. Yeah. So, 20 years back, when I finished my master's in NID and I started my professional career in the field of design, the moment I told people that, I've become a designer after engineer, and people said, "Arey, fashion design after engineering." And that's when I realized that the world actually recognizes the word design as fashion design. Nothing wrong with it, because the fashion industry is actually worth 1.2 trillion US dollars every year. Massive, massive, massive industry. But that's what most of the people in India think design is. When you say you're a product designer or a communications designer or an immersive media designer, they don't understand that very much, because they think that design is always about designing clothes. I have traveled across the country speaking to schools and to students such as yourself. And whenever I've been to schools and I've been to engineering colleges, and I say, "Look, what do you think design is?" And I show this slide, all the engineers smile, all the engineers nod, all the school children nod, because they associate glamour, they associate the automotive industry with design. The word design is often very glamorous. Nothing wrong with that either, because it's $1.7 trillion industry. Another definition of design that the Indian society seems to understand design as, with all the celebrity film stars doing interior design and interior decoration, a lot of Indian magazines, if you go to any Indian bookstore and look up the word design, you'll see a dozen magazines with interior design as design, interior design or spatial design. And so design is also understood by Indian society as interior design, spaces and materials. $22 trillion industry. Finally, not actually finally, now you come to my universe of product design. Now, these are these objects all around you. Your TVs, your smartphones, your digital electronics, your routers, your fancy smartphones, what we together call as mass-produced consumer goods. And the total value last year was approximately $12 trillion. Designers everywhere, because every artifact that you see is actually done by designers somewhere, right? But everything has changed in the last 5 years. All these conventional rules, just like Professor Vijay said, all these conventional rules have completely fallen by the wayside because we have seen the emergence of what we call as a digital universe, where there is some hardware, there is some software, there is immersive media, there is design, there is art, there is communication, and it all comes together absolutely beautiful. So I call this the emergence of the digital universe, and the valuation currently is about $1 trillion US. So I showed you so many different definitions of design. What do you think is the correct definition of design? I'll give you a moment to ponder while I catch my breath. According to me, as an engineer and a product designer, I would like to define design as good design is a combination of 4 different factors: functionality, usability, affordability, and value. Now, we don't need to really define what functionality is, right? Functionality simply means if you buy something, it should work really well. If you buy a pen, it has to write well. If you buy a car, it has to drive well. Functionality is understood. Now, what is usability? Usability essentially refers to the ease that you can use a product with. Imagine to operate a microwave if you had to read an operating manual. It's a disaster as far as design is concerned. So usability simply means how enjoyable that experience is. Affordability. What is affordability? Affordability is basically how that particular segment can afford that particular product. One of the biggest misconceptions here is that India wants cheap stuff. It is not true. India is an aspirational economy. India needs good stuff. It needs good design, not cheap design. And finally, what's value? Value is for the money that you've paid, do you get enough value? And in the world of design, the word value can be defined in multiple ways. Sometimes it is about the life of the product. You buy something, it will last you for 3 years, 4 years, trouble-free existence. That's value. Sometimes it gives you the pleasure. That is value. So good design is often a mix of all these 4 different things. Now, in my world of product design or industrial design, there are broad classifications of design, right? And there are some ground rules as well. These are what I call as functional designs. Functional designs, for example, look at the tractor. The aesthetics doesn't matter so much, right? Art doesn't matter so much. But things like hospital beds, hospital environments, tractors, these are extremely functional designs. Design also arouses a lot of emotions. And that's the magic of design, right? You look at that image on the top right-hand corner, that's a salt and pepper shaker, which actually signifies the Arab and the Israeli, coming together, though they live in a conflict zone. And the black and the white signify the meeting of the opposites. So design has the capability to arouse emotions. Design embraces technology in a very, very big way. So design is just not about art. Design is just not about creativity, but it understands technology massively. So we are always opening things. We are always running around with screwdrivers, trying to understand how things work. Because if we have to design these systems, we need to know how these things work. So we understand a lot about technology, right? And I love this slide design brings fundamentally social impact. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen this slide. I'm sure many of you know what this product is, but since I cannot see your wonderful faces and your smiling faces, I'll tell you what this is. This is what is known as the Life Straw. It's a $2 pipe with mechanical filters and some activated charcoal, which allows you to drink water from any flowing source of water, and you get pure water. So it's hugely successful in countries in the African continent and the South Asian continent, where drinking water is a huge issue. $2 device, okay, supplied all over the world by WHO. So design has the potential to bring social impact. So how would you really define design as? In my world, design is actually a creative process that brings services, processes, objects, artifacts, and they make it comfortable, safe, economical to own and operate. But fundamentally, it is all about making the quality of life better, because that is the primordial objective of design, and that is to make life better. Design always starts with user as a centric point or the consumer as a centric point, and not your artistic ability. It is always about the person who needs it on site. And I love this slide. Design is not about aesthetics. It is always about people. It's about what people need, what people want, what people deserve, what this earth deserves. And so therefore, design encapsulates that. And a lot of you might be asking this. And in thousands of interviews that I've done in the last 20 years of my teaching, you know, everybody says, and I'm sure I've met some of you as well, and I'll always ask this question saying, why design? And you'll say, well, I was creative from my childhood because I could draw and paint. And so the question that I would like to ask you isn't design art? That's a question that must be running in your head. If I can draw, if I can paint, isn't that design? The answer is no, that's not design. So the difference between art and the difference between design is that art is essentially meant as adding aesthetic value, or it could be, let's say, provocative value. But design is always beauty with function. That's when you marry. The human element is very, very strong in design. That the artist can very well say, look, this is my creation, this is my art, so you can take it or leave it. But design can never do that. Designers always think by putting themselves in the shoes of the users or the consumers that they think, right? So you must have heard of the word design thinking. Now, this is very, very interesting. A few anecdotes just to cheer you up, right? The word design thinking is broken into two parts: design and thinking. Design means knowing how to do it. In other words, how to design, how to make things. But thinking is really about knowing what to do. And you need both of these to be able to come out with an efficient result. So the question that I would like to ask and talk about probably is, how do designers really think? How do designers think? How do we think? How will you think in the coming few years, right? Now, all of you must know this. In your high school, they must have taught you that the brain has two different lobes. There is the left brain, there is the right brain. The left brain is very mathematical, very logical, very sequential. 2 + 2 = 4. And the right brain is all very artistic, very fuzzy. It's about writing poetry. It is about listening to music. It is about drawing. It is about art. So what do you think design is? Left brain or right brain? Let's consider the left brain and the right brain in isolation, okay, one by one, just to understand which works and which doesn't for us. Because most people think that design is actually right brain. So here we go. What has our schooling taught us? Our schooling and our education system always teaches us convergent thinking, which is very left brain based. In other words, it is logical, it's unemotional, it's very mathematical. That's what convergent thinking is. That's what you've been taught. You've been taught how to analyze, how to deduct things, right? Or deductive thinking. So by that definition, this should work, isn't it? By pure left brain thinking, this should work. It fires, but it fires in the wrong way. You'll laugh and you'll say, look, that's a stupid thing to say. I agree, it's a stupid thing to say. So left brain thinking in isolation does not really work. What about this? How many of you have seen this? Had I been speaking to you live, all of you would have put up your hands and said, I exactly know what this is. This is a Tata Sky remote. This is a TV remote. Now, simple question I'll ask you. How many buttons do you really need in a remote? Had I been speaking to you live, I would have actually made to count. But since we're not speaking to you and I can't see your faces, let me do the counting. Power, on and off, mute, channel up and down, and the organizer, and maybe a couple of others, right? But look at the remote. How many different buttons do you have? Such a complex remote. It looks as if you can launch a spacecraft to the moon with this kind of a remote. Why so many buttons? And none of you would have ever questioned as to why we use such a complicated remote. You would have adapted to it. That's the thing about good design and bad design. What about this? What do you call this? Jugaad, innovation, smart thinking, clever thinking. My answer is, this is called stupidity, right? This is called stupidity because they put the hinge on the wrong side and then they realized, oh, the door now is touching the commode, so we will cut that little arc out to enable the door to open and close. What a terrible idea. And we always celebrate this in the name of the great Indian Jugaad. So my friends, Jugaad is not good design. Jugaad is band-aid design, which is terrible for our country, right? Good design has to replace Jugaad or band-aid design. Now let's look at the right brain, which all of us think we are right brain people, right? Saying we are creative, we're empathetic, blah, 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 we're emotional. Let's take a look purely at right brain ideas. What about this? Do you think a product like this works? Well, it solves the problem, right? Hot noodles solves the problem. But you and I know that it's a terrible idea. It's a bad idea. It works, but it's a bad idea, right? What about this? This is actually a real photograph, and this belongs to the company Otis. Now tell me, just look at this and say, what do you press when you have to go up, and what do you press when you have to go down? A man would be so confused, or a person would be so confused that the person would press both and say, lift to aayega na yahan pe ultimately. So, and then you would wait for the lift to come, right? So this is another example of what bad design really is. That design always thinks about the cognitive or the mental model of the user. So the answer that I ask my friends as to how designers think lies bang in the center. It is exactly in the center of the left brain and the right brain. And design is basically absolutely laser sharp creativity to answer social and business challenges. You need logic, you need the ability to know how to make things, yet you need creativity, and yet you need focused creativity to solve business and social challenges. So design lies bang in the center of your head and not just in the right part of your brain. Now, interesting question. What's the problem in this picture? I'm not talking about the guy, because the guy was a big problem at some point in time in the world, right? I'm talking about the umbrella. Big problem. All of us have experienced this in the Indian monsoons. Umbrella turning inside out. What did you do? You turned it back, you put your leg on it, you turned it back, and then you closed it and you went about way. But two Dutch students did not do that. Two Dutch students studying industrial design at the Delft University of Technology designed and produced what is known as the Sense umbrella. These are not just images I'm showing you. I actually have a Sense umbrella because in 2009, I went to Netherlands. I was invited by the Dutch government, and they actually presented me with an umbrella as an example of good design, and it works brilliantly. Look at the aerodynamic structure, cuts the wind, prevents the umbrella from turning inside out, and works brilliantly. Simple problem to be solved, but magically solved, right? Great product. So, how many of you have seen these images? Women in Gujarat, parts of Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Haryana, traveling for miles and miles to get water, sometimes many, many times a day, with 4 or 5 pots on top of their heads, and doing this their entire lives. Now, Think about it. The amount of weight that they carry leads to severe back injuries by the time they are 40, which gives them back pain. They're unable to rear children. They're unable to sleep properly. But that's the price to pay for living in an arid region. Look what they've done in Africa for the same problem. So this magical product is called the Hippo Roller. I have used one in Africa. I've traveled to Africa and I've used one. It doesn't work exactly as you think it would be, seamless because of the dirt and the mud, but it is way better than carrying 100 liters of water on your head. Because all they have done is that they have used the existing Syntex tank, or what we call as, your PVC tank, and they have attached a handle to it, and you can roll 100 liters of water away and preventing severe back injuries. So when we talk about what design has to be, there are some ground rules that we expect all of you to follow. One, good design has to be innovative. What do we mean by this? Take a look at the example. All of us have plugs, right? With the rising number of electronics, we have more and more chargers, more and more things. And what have we done? We have built bigger and bigger and bigger switch ports because you need more chargers to put in. But look what they did in the UK, right? A simple award-winning design, which is called the folding plug. If any of you has opened a plug, you'll realize that there is one earthing wire and then there is one positive and negative, and it is just empty air with a big bulky thing that hasn't changed in the last 30 years. Nobody's bothered to change it. But look what they did in the UK, right? Simple folding plug, saves a lot of space, multiple plugs go in. So design and good design always has to aim for innovation. Innovation means a dramatically new way of doing things. Innovation has to happen. Good design is always focused on functionality and making products useful. Now, this is a baby bottle sterilizer which prevents bacterial infection for babies because it kind of sterilizes. Good design is aesthetic. Good design has to be beautiful. If design is not beautiful, people will not buy it. So good design is just not about aesthetics, also has to be aesthetic along with functionality. Good design, and which is very important, and also what Professor Vijay mentioned, is that good design has to be long lasting. We are no longer in that phase where you can buy a product and throw it out after a month because there is no place to throw away things. This earth, the space is over. Our cities are filled with garbage pits. We are generating enormous amounts of waste. And so we have to focus on building products that last for long periods of time. Remember when your grandfathers and your fathers would say, Sony TV lena, it will last you for 10 years? That's what we're talking about, right? Good design is always long lasting. It is unlike any of this. Good design is also environmentally friendly. This is also very important, what Vijay also mentioned, right? Good design is also very, very, very environmentally friendly. Look at it. If we can actually sell soaps like this, it simply means that we can avoid the plastic wrapping. If we can avoid the plastic wrapping, we can do this. So good design is good business. This is a slide for the first time in the history of design. People have done evaluation and they have established statistically, which was done by the Design Management Institute, that companies that rely on design have shown a 211% increase in profits as compared to companies that don't rely on design. So how do designers really work? One, we understand people's needs. Different kinds of people, not just you, me. Different kinds of people will travel to the deep hinterlands of the country, really understanding what people need. We understand markets. Okay, we do market research, we do user research, we understand how people behave, how people buy things, how people do. We understand technology. We create, we make, we prototype. We actually make models, we prototype. And this is a wonderful slide. One of my last slides today simply says that whether you accept it or not, everything around you, whether you realize it or not, every object, every interface, every experience around you has been designed. It's only now that people are waking up to this formal profession of design, but design has been all around, from the computers, from the iPad, from the mugs that you drink coffee from the bottles that you drink water from your toothbrush. They were all designed by people, and without design, this world cannot exist. And this is my last slide. And I love that sentence which says, design touches your life in more ways than you can imagine. And welcome to the real world, because it is a $50 trillion industry today. And it is the profession of the future, where there is no retirement, there is no ending. And as long as your brains and your hands and your skills work, you will continue to flourish in this profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskar sir. I don't know why design was not so popular when I was passing my 12th. Yeah. So participants, we are open for question and answers. We already have 2 questions, sir. The first question says, I want to make kinetic sculpture in future as my career. So should I go for a product design or industrial design? Bhaskar sir?
Kinetic sculpture is essentially that confluence where we use mechanics, principles of sculptural design, moving sculptures, and so on and so forth, right? So it involves knowledge of electronics, it involves knowledge of forces, it involves knowledge of mechanisms, joints, and structure, and so on and so forth. But it is not traditional product design. Of course, you can do, but I would suggest that you do it as a hobby. I mean, join us and do it as a hobby. We'll be happy to encourage you and happy to teach you. But the mainstay of industrial design really is your consumer durables, medical equipment, interface design, automotive design, furniture, lifestyle accessories. These are hardcore industrial design. That's where the industry is, and that's where the jobs are, that's where the projects are, that's where the money is. That's mainstream. So kinetic sculpture is more art-based. Happy to help you, but that's not really the career path.
So second question is, should I go with photography as a part of my career with product design?
I mean, we all do photography. It's something that we all train for. One of the magic. I mean, I'm an engineer, but the fact is that photography actually sensitizes you to looking at the world with a different set of eyes, and that's very important for being creative. Right? It is just not about holding a camera and taking a snap. It is really looking at the world with a different pair of eyes. It's that, but you see the world in a different way. So you will definitely do photography all your life. It goes without saying. Happy to help. I mean, Professor Vijay is a don probably at that area. So.
Vijay sir, you're on mute. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, you can pursue, as Professor Bhaskar was saying, you can pursue either kinetic sculpture or photography, and you can apply the knowledge that you learn through industrial design to your special projects, which can, be art-based aesthetics completely. And that's, I think all designers do have these kind of special projects, which are their own. So you obviously can apply that. But as a design school, your mainstay will focus on designing, functional, durable goods. And of course, what I do is immersive storytelling. So that's a different area. But if you really want to do just kinetic sculpture, then perhaps it's a different, I think you should think of different schools.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I would suggest that.
Yeah.
Bhaskar sir, question for you. What is the difference between industrial and product design?
Oh, very interesting question. Actually, there is no difference. So these are two faces of the same coin, but I'll try and differentiate, right? And this is not a traditional textbook answer, but product design essentially deals with all sorts of artifacts, all sorts of tangible artifacts. Now, of course, the definition has changed to include interaction design as well, or interfaces or digital products are also called products. But traditionally, product design was always about furniture. It was about pottery, it was about glassware, it was about automotives and so on and so forth, right? But the word industrial design, in my view, and you have to take it with a pinch of salt, I think really refers to the mass-produced nature of goods. If you look at the early furniture designers and architects, they were all small jobs in the sense that, few pieces were produced. So here is the difference. Industrial designers never talk about one prototype. We will always say, iske 10 lakh piece kaise banenge? So that's the scale that we talk about, right? I mean, if you do something like a water bottle like this, it's crazy to think that you're going to make 10 pieces. This is nitrogen blow molding as a process, right? And unless you make 10,000 bottles, it will not be cost effective. So industrial design essentially refers to the mass-produced nature of goods. That's about it. But they're just sister terms. You can use them interchangeably.
So next question. I am interested in movie making. Then which design should I choose?
I mean, movie making might be a minor subject for in our scheme of things, but not a major. So there will be the courses which will focus on this aspect. But as a major, I think you will have to think of film school, which kind of specializes in that. But yes, as part of communication, sort of design, filmmaking, aspects of filmmaking, storytelling is definitely something which we cover, but not as a full-time sort of pursuit, as a major. So you will have to think on that.
The question for Bhaskar sir again. What's the difference between an engineer and a designer?
Oh, very interesting question. So engineers, I'm both, so I can answer this. Engineers are taught how to make, right? There are multiple different branches of engineering, right? So they're mechanical engineers, they're chemical engineers. So it's a technical specialization. So when you study engineering, you have a technical expertise over either processes or mechanisms. If you're studying mechanical engineering, then you're dealing with stress and strain and so on and so forth. Designers actually humanize the technology, right? We always bring in that human element. So if you look at modern day products, it's always about humans. It's always about people who use it. So the approach of design is completely different. The approach of design is you respect engineering, you have to work with engineers, otherwise your products don't come out. Don't be arrogant and say कि हमें engineer के साथ काम करना पड़ेगा साथ. That's how this world runs, right? And they're very wonderful people. But this is the marriage of equals, where you bring in human-centered thinking and they bring in technical expertise, and that's how everything comes to exist in the real
world. So there is a student called Gunj. There are 2-3 questions. I'm clubbing all these 3 questions into one. So Gunj is asking, is design introduced in India recently, or was it in India from earlier in terms of education, industry, and studios? And can you tell what is the history of design in India and with respect to ancient times? And the third question is, can traditional crafts like pottery or Sankeda furniture come or get influence under the design? So there are 3 questions I've clubbed into one.
Vijay, you want to take that?
I would take sort of a more sort of art perspective. Like we can think of a design to be very much part of our life from any given time, and we are one of the ancient civilization. You can look at you can look at the sort of archaeological sites that have been found. They are completely well designed cities and fragments of products that have been found. So obviously somebody was thinking about them, thinking about the functionality of them, thinking about the form of it. So all that is in place, especially the temple architecture. If you see on the architectural side, we have massive sort of leap in the technology, in the design understanding, in the functionality of the form. So all that is definitely has been a part of our ecosystem and not something new. But as a formal training, Bhaskar, perhaps you would be more attuned to it. But I don't see sort of more formal sort of education to be evolving in a much more recent sort of way. So it's a more sort of a recent phenomenon to formalize this courses, formalize different fields, bringing it together and giving some kind of a structure. So it's a more recent phenomena, but I wouldn't be able to give you more specifics on it. Perhaps Bhaskar sir, you can sort of chime in on this.
I can take a shot at it if Abhishek could repeat that question, because all that medication is making me very fuzzy today. So I lost the question.
So the question was design introduced in India recently in terms of education and the scope of and job opportunities, or it was in India earlier and it been get a front face right now? And what is the history of design in India? So yeah.
Oh, okay. This will take 5 minutes, 5-7 minutes of answering, but I'll try and keep it as simple as this, right? We are a 5,000-year-old civilization, right? So, as Vijay rightly said, the fact that we are one of the oldest civilizations in the world, we learned to build our houses, we knew how to do agriculture, we built our own tools, our own equipment, simply means that historically design has always existed. You might not call it design, but any act of creativity which allows you to perform a particular function more effectively is design, right? Speaking like a product design, right? So, speaking only like a product design. So, traditionally, design has always existed in this country because we are an ancient civilization. But modern design, if you want to call it modern design, is probably was introduced in this country in 1961 with the formation of NID, with Jawaharlal Nehru calling Charles and Ray Eames, two very, very famous American designers, to the country. They went around the country. They wrote a report called the India Report, and then they suggested that there had to be institutions or an institution which preserves and propagates the designerly culture of this country in its own way, not the American mass manufactured design, which was very popular in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. But they said, look, India has to do it in its own way. And thus, NID was formed in 1961. IIT Bombay, the design department, came up in 1971. And so that's really when design really took off. And then, of course, you had IIT Guwahati, IIT Kanpur, you've had, and as of today, there are about 130 different programs that exist in this country. So in 60 years, we've grown from one school to 138 schools, if I'm not mistaken. So modern design, if you want to call it, yeah, it's only about 61 years old. But my answer would be that it's probably 5,000-year-old in this country. One should be very proud of that.
There are many questions which are coming up, which are very specific to the specializations we are offering, like UI, UX, and sustainable fashion and all that. Just to inform you, all the participants, that this is the first webinar of the series. We are coming up with with a webinar for every specialization offering, communication, product, then space design, everything we are coming up every week. You will be getting notified for all these webinars. Today, I'm taking general questions related to product design and related questions. So if I am not taking your questions, don't start sending me WhatsApp that आपने मेरा question नहीं लिया. So we will be taking your questions in the coming webinars. One question more, sir. I know would be able to answer. I am thinking of becoming an automobile designer and also want to do interior design side by side. Is it possible to do?
Straight answer, no. Not worth it.
Don't try it.
No beating around the bush. No. Both are very, very, very intensive disciplines. Both require different skill sets. Both require different thinking capabilities. Both have different processes. So you should not really mix oil and water.
Yeah.
You need both. You need oil and you need water. Don't mix them.
Yeah.
Halanki, there is something called there is something called automotive interiors.
Yeah.
In the industry, क्योंकि अगर आप transportation design करते हो, उसके बाद आप बाहर जाके बढ़ जाते हो ऐसे. There are people who specialize in exteriors. There are people who specialize in interiors, automotive interiors. जो we call them CMF, color, materials and finish. तो वो trims और वो dashboard design और अंदर का steering controls, वो सब UI UX उस पे चलता है dashboard वगैरह पे. Or there is a team that completely focuses on the exterior. वो अंदर झांक के भी नहीं देखेंगे कि अंदर क्या. ठीक है? So automotive interiors is probably what you're talking about, but please don't mix interior design and automotive design. बिल्कुल दो अलग श्रेणियां हैं, and both of them deserve respect, full-time attention and full-time respect.
Vijay sir, question for you. I am interested in comics and illustration. So what design field should I choose?
Comics is a completely, but perhaps aspects of comics, perhaps aspects of illustrations are useful in communication design, in overall kind of design strategy. But as a specialization, I'm not sure if ANU has something for this discipline. I personally am not aware of it. As like you all, I'm also kind of fairly new to the ecosystem, and we are evolving. But I'm not quite sure if comics and illustration as a career goal they want to pursue. If we have really something, I'm not quite. Perhaps Abhishek, Bhaskar, if you are aware, you can answer this. But I'm personally not.
I'm not a comics person, so.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that we definitely use aspects of strategies in comics for immersive storytelling. Those aspects are useful, and we do some of my students are employing those strategies in designing immersive environments. But as a specialization, I'm not sure if we can sort of if we have anything to offer on that front. But yes, aspects of it, we are using it in overall communication design.
Yeah, so the next question, I will take 3 more questions. The first of the 3 is, sir, I am confused between the product and industrial designing to what to choose.
There is no difference, as I said. You can call it any which ways. I mean, it doesn't matter. So nobody offers you industrial design and product design. वो एक ही बात. So don't worry about it. Don't fall for names. Look at the content more than anything else. Packaging पे मत जाओ.
There's one question which I will answer. When will the class get started? So most probably in the month of August is when we will be starting our new academic session. Yeah, so we'll be notifying you when we'll be starting our session, most probably by mid to end of July. What is the topmost skill that an industrial design aspirant should focus on developing?
It's not one topmost skill. There are 4. And you have to train for this repeatedly through every semester. अगर एक में भी कम रह गया तो फिर आप अच्छे industrial designer नहीं बन पाते. Right? The first is the knowledge of the design process as to how to solve a particular problem, how to identify the right thing to do. How do you address it? How do you get information? So the design process is the cognitive aspect of product design, which is very, very critical. Product design is not about sketching. Product design is not about drawing something fancy and saying कि हाँ ये बन गया बस ऐसे नहीं. So it's about really understanding. It's really about knowing what to do because there are very complex challenges out there, right? We've moved from a very simple let's build a chair to a very, very complex ecosystem like COVID today, for example. So one is design process. The second is a very, very deep understanding of manufacturing technology and materials that come with it. This is absolutely important because you can think of all the fancy ideas in the world, but if you don't know how it's going to be made, you can't make it. And so you will not survive in the industry. So manufacturing technology and materials. And the third is the expression that goes with it. So sketching and 3D modeling are absolute lifesaver skills. Iske bina aap nahi sakte. So I would probably bundle them into 3. Very strong understanding of design processes and the variations thereof. Materials and manufacturing methods. and finally sketching and 3D modeling. ये तीन चाहिए, वरना नहीं हो पाए.
As I said in between that there are many questions related specifically for the specialization. We would be happy to answer those when we will be conducting the webinar for that particular specialization. Sir, I don't see any further questions.
Abhishek, there's one question which I see in the chat box which I think deserves an answer.
Yes, sir.
Abhishek? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
Christopher has actually asked a very interesting question. He says, design is also used in the field of military like missiles, guns, etc. Wouldn't that be contradictory to the motto of designing for its functionality and usability to harm human life rather than making it better? It's a very, very interesting question on the ethical nature of design. Right? And I would urge you to, so I will not make bones about it because it is absolutely important. So you can use a gun to defend your country or to kill a person who's attacking your country. It goes both ways, right? So I would rather use all my design skills to make the lives of our people at the border more comfortable, right? To design better equipment for them because they are underpaid. They make great sacrifices so that you can study at a design school, to be very honest with you, because they keep the country safe so that you can do what you're doing today. So we have to use our skills and we have to give them that respect. So we can do that. That would be my answer. It is not contradictory at all.
okay. No more questions coming up, sir. So thank you so much, Bhaskar sir. Thank you so much, Vijay sir, for giving us time and sharing such knowledge with these young design aspirants who would be joining some of the other design institutes in India. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in on a Friday evening. Do register us for the webinar series. We'll be sending you all the links very soon for the next workshop, which would be I will not say right now. So it's a workshop that is coming up, not a webinar. So check your mails and your WhatsApp regularly. Thank you once again, everyone. Have a happy weekend.